and I was having almost a full conversation with somebody from the Second World War. I could picture him perfectly, his features. Wow. I could see him sitting in the chair and he was looking at a window, and at the window was a nurse.
Tell me about your sort of experience with apparitions.
Well, I suppose they started as a child, like most people. I think people thought I was just a very weird, unconventional child. I used to spend a lot of time by myself because I was a lot younger than my brother and sister. And I suppose people always thought I just had a very active imagination. But to me, it was just, I think I had a greater sense of awareness, whether it be that sixth sense. And yeah, I experienced a lot growing up in terms of maybe intuition or premonitions. I would have a lot of deja vu. Ooh. I went to places and I was adamant that I'd been there, that my mum knew I'd never been, but I knew the place, I knew where things were. And little moments like that, I think my family started to realise that I wasn't just crazy. I actually maybe could pick things up. I think probably it started around about maybe 7 or 8. I think I was probably aware of it before, but it only became very conscious after that. And I think that in my mind, it got, should we say, amplified because of having a traumatic experience. So going through something like that in a strange way, it sort of opened me up to something. Yeah. And I started to become much more aware that there was something other than what everybody else was seeing. And nobody else seemed to get it. So I kept it to myself for a very long time, but it was that knowingness feeling about things that were going to happen, or I could sense something, or I knew what people were going to say next. And yeah, that sort of, I kept it to myself for a long time.
Can you tell us about one of your most prominent stories when you were around that sort of time, that sort of age?
I think for me, it was probably being aware of when people would get sick, or maybe friends and family dying, having inclinations that something was going to happen and then it did. And yeah, and I think as a kid I started to think, oh, am I making this happen? Am I? And then you start to get in that fearful phrase of, well, every time I think about it, now something bad's going to happen. Yeah. But I learned to just know that actually it was more that I was just, I guess, picking something up, but it would work for good things as well. I would do it throughout school. Maybe this leads into the whole manifesting and consciousness thing, but I would, if I had an adamant thought or belief about something, it would manifest. And so,
and you said, we talked earlier, and you talked about seeing actual spirits, sort of apparitions. Yes. Can you talk about one in particular that you feel that stood out for you, that you remember?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of full physical intense experiences, I mean, I had seen people in various other places before, flashes of images and sort of ghostly movement, should we say, going on. Certainly working in a lot of old hotels, I've seen objects move, things flying around and stuff like that. But I think it's weird because it felt like this was a build up to it, because I'd seen so many of these little things that you start to question your own sanity and you think, is this really me? Yeah. My dad also had these moments, and then my sister bought for my birthday a trip to a pub that had been featured on a TV show, and we went to do a paranormal investigation there with just a small group of us, and me and my dad were there, and we got taken off in separate rooms, and I was having almost a full conversation with somebody from the Second World War. I could picture him perfectly, his features. Wow. I could see him sitting in the chair and he was looking at a window, and at the window was a nurse.
So could you see this through was this in your mind's eye, or you actually saw this person?
It's kind of a combination of both, in the sense that I could see that there was an empty chair, but there was like an overlay where I could then also see a human, and it was so clear in my mind, almost as if recalling a memory. So I think to myself, maybe I'm imagining it, but I could see the details, the dress, like the guy's moustache. I could smell the odor, tobacco and things like that. And I was getting relayed messages as to what they were experiencing. And they were in two completely different timelines, but they were actually romantic lovers. She was waiting for him and he'd been waiting for her, and they'd missed each other. And then he died in war, but he always comes back to wait for her, and she's always waiting at the window for him. And
This is
then
a soldier?
yeah, and then my dad, he later went into that room and came back and described the exact same man.
Wow, so
So
your experiences are definitely linked also with your family, aren't they? Then?
yeah, they seem to be. My dad's always had things like this. But the strongest one was down in the cellar, which was a hooded figure, very, very tall. And we were in pitch black, but I could clearly see this person.
This was through your eyes this time?
This was physically as I'm seeing you now.
Manifested in front of you.
It was very obvious, and it literally, you felt like you could touch it. You could see the movement of the body as it moved around the cellar, and then it stopped directly in front of me, and I started physically shaking, and not like a convulsion, just my whole body went into tremors, and I felt fine. And then it just bent down, looked directly into my face, and it was just this blackness there, and then just walked straight through me. And it just went ice cold, and I felt like I had ice cold, like sticky cobwebs all over my skin, and I was rubbing myself and doing all this to get rid of it, and it wouldn't come off me. And
Wow,
and then the energy just totally lifted. And my dad from the other side of the bench was watching, and he saw the whole thing as well. So
wow.
yeah, it was quite an experience, and nobody had told us beforehand what we would experience. And so when we then came out of the cellar and I described it, the investigators had confirmed that yeah, this was a place where they'd uncovered remains.
Yeah, I've heard that mediums also can experience that sense of cobweb, like cobwebs hitting their face or around their mouth or something like that, when a spirit is manifesting around them. That's really, really interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I'd never heard, that was just my experience of it, and I'd never spoken to anyone else. But once I described it to a couple of other people who had had similar experiences, they confirmed that that's exactly what they felt as well. So then I knew I wasn't completely crazy.
Yeah. You also said earlier that you've experienced quite a few sort of poltergeist experiences where you've seen objects moving. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so I think I'd had experiences of that growing up at home, and I used to have a lot of dreams of being pulled away into some ether by spirits, and it used to scare the crap out of me. But then I would be in my home on my own, and I could hear people walking around upstairs, or I could hear things in the kitchen. Even after one of my mum's partners had passed away, the very next morning I could hear him whistling a tune. When another one of my mum's partners passed away sort of years later, I could smell the alcohol and the cigarettes that he had, and I could smell his aftershave. And I remember once saying to my mum about how, you know, I'm sure he's looking down on us, because he was heavily into mediumship, and I said he'll find a way to contact us. And as I was leaving, I heard a voice say, "It's all right, Lou." And my mum, she was like, "I think I heard that too." And my mum's not at all like this. She doesn't have any of these. Yeah. But it was lovely confirmation. And then I started to experience more, I guess, poltergeist activity when I worked at a hotel. They'd done a lot of renovations and opened up something. And then we had a kettle boiling on the side that just literally unplugged itself and shot across the counter. We had cutlery that would get thrown. You would literally put something down and then you'd turn around and it was on the other side of the room. Even walking through, when I had to deliver, say, laundry to some of the bedrooms, I could hear somebody walking around behind me. things would always go missing, and yeah, it was a very common occurrence. And I had it around people's houses. I used to get invited to people's houses before they bought somewhere to see if I could sense if anything was a bit off about the place.
Right.
Yeah, I never divulged anything.
I'll have to ask you about my studio.
Yes. I'm feeling good things here. We're all right.
Good vibes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Louise, and thanks for taking part and telling me your stories.
That's fine. I hope it's been helpful to people watching.
Lovely. If you would like your story featured on Phantom Limb, then get in touch through the email below in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well. See you on the next one.